I've set myself the task of actually doing the worst job in every era of history. But which was it for the Georgians? No, for me, the very worst job started every morning right here at 6 a.m. And as you can see from the size of the beds, it was a job done by children. It was actually 2 to a bed here, and these kids could only ever dream of becoming powder monkeys. The 18th century saw the birth of the Industrial Revolution that changed Britain forever, but it would never even have got off the ground if it hadn't been for worse jobs like the mule scavenger. Mills like Quarry Bank near Manchester were technological marvels, using first water and then the new medium of steam to power cotton production. But they weren't so forward-thinking about employment. The mill owners here, though by no means the worst, used to buy, yes, buy children as young as 6 from the workhouse for a couple of quid to be apprentices. For not more than board and lodging, they worked at least 12 hours a day.
The very worst job in a factory, right at the bottom of the hierarchy of the mill, was the little scavengers. They were mostly the youngest children. Yeah. And what they had to do was to go underneath this machine.
What, right through the back here?
Yeah.
Oh, keep away from it.
Yeah, right under that machine there, while it was working, and clean away all the bits of loose cotton that had fallen down.
It must have been quite dangerous.
Well, it was incredibly dangerous. If you think about it, the early mules couldn't be stopped. You couldn't stop the machine to clean them.
Yeah.
And in any case, the spinners were paid by the piece, so they had no interest in stopping the machine.
Well, I suppose the thing about kids is that they tend not to concentrate and muck about.
Absolutely. Kids and machinery just don't mix.
Yeah.
And after 12 hours of working in this place, you can imagine that children would be tired and inattentive, and it only required 1 second of inattention to get a finger caught in one of these wheels, or to even get squeezed between the carriage and the back of the machinery.
Do we know much about the kind of injuries that they got?
Well, the kind of day-to-day injuries, which in a place like this would have been ranged from anything from cut fingers to severed hands, quite often would not be recorded, certainly in the Georgian period.
Because they weren't thought important enough?
Well, indeed. For the workers they were important, because clearly if you lost a hand, you could never work again.
Yeah, yeah.
But then quite often most of the accidents were regarded as the workers' own fault.
There was only one thing for it. Time to put on my calico trousers and get started on my career as a scavenger. So I'm all kitted up, no shirt, as you can see. It's really hot in here. It can't be much cooler because otherwise these threads can snap, and no shoes either, because normally they'd have worn clogs with metal studs. But if your clog hits part of this machinery, it can cause a spark. And as you can see, there's lots of little bits of fluff in here, and if the spark hit one of those, then woof, the whole thing could go up in flames. So Peter, I'm ready to go. What do I need to do?
Okay, here's your scavenger's brush, and here's your scavenger's sack.
Right.
Now what you've got to do is to get into this rather cramped space under the machine.
Yeah.
And basically, the job's pretty simple. You've got to brush up all of this waste cotton.
There's a load of muck up here as well, isn't there? It's all stuck all over the machine.
Yeah, well, that's your job too. You've got to brush all that down and make sure that it's not going to contaminate the cotton.
That's incredibly dusty, actually, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Chris, can you start it up? I just want to see how...
You can imagine how dangerous it would be to be cleaning off these wheels as well, you know, and the ropes and the machine.
Yeah, it would be if your concentration shifted, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
For 12 hours a day, the scavenger needed incredible agility. Today there's an emergency button to stop the machine, but even so, I still had to watch out. Losing your concentration could be fatal, as the memorandum book for the mill records for one accident in Georgian times.
A very melancholy accident befell a lad named Joseph Foden, about 13 years of age. While engaged sweeping under a mule, his head was caught between the roller beam and the carriage, as the latter was putting up, and completely smashed. Death being instantaneous.
Be careful.
It would really take your feet off, wouldn't it? If you were concentrating over this bit here and you got your foot down there.
Yep. Feet, fingers.
You know what the real problem is? That there's no even rhythm. It sort of starts off really slowly, and then when it gets to the top there's this rather unnerving pause, and you're just kind of waiting for it to start again, and you're sort of trying to do as much work as you can but get yourself in position, and then it starts to roll back quite slowly and then gets faster and faster. Do you see how that last bit was a real sprint? So because there's no steady rhythm, it's hard to work out a steady strategy so that you're always in the right place. And your feet feel incredibly vulnerable for when it comes back behind you. You don't know if you're going to whack them on this thing. So it's actually much more knackering than you'd think it is. It's so knackering. I tell you what it is. If it was a regular rhythm, you could work out how you were going to do it.
Yeah.
But because it's in such jerks, it's like driving a car off-road that you're constantly having to concentrate. So, you know, I imagine what it must have been like for kids, because the moment you let the concentration stop, you lose sync with the rhythm of it. And it's actually the backing out. You see, backing out through here, it's a doddle, isn't it? As long as you know you can go straight back,
Yep.
you're not going to get hurt. Even if you got bonked over the head, you can come out. But get stuck in this stuff here.
Get on one of these things.
Yeah,
You've had it.
there's nowhere to go. So for a kid,
Yeah.
a hell of a job.
Very good.
After 12 hours of back-breaking work on their hands and knees, the children returned to the apprentice house, where they'd be rewarded with a supper of thin gruel and chores before bedtime. Then it was up again at 6 for another day's scavenging. Our modern industrial age was born in places like Quarry Bank, and if it hadn't been for young workers like the doffers and piecers and scavengers doing all the worst jobs, the whole thing would have ground to a halt. And if you think things can only get better, you'd be wrong.